Fire Mountain Aria, written and narrated by Jill Penrod. Chapter 20. It's beautiful, I said. I whispered it, stunned and awed. I thought Montefallo was beautiful, but this reef was just as beautiful. And I could see. Colors and textures were vivid and bright in my eyes, and it didn't hurt. I loved the greens of the fields and trees. It worked, Gianni said, laughing. We can see, and it didn't hurt to get here. Trace laughed. Neither G nor I had completely trusted a jump to the Tormandu reef. We are so glad you're here, Katie said. I hadn't seen this woman before, but I knew she was the charterhead, Tormandu's leader. She had a calming smile. And I'm sorry you were afraid to come. I wasn't afraid, G said. Then he laughed. Fine, I was afraid it wouldn't work. Trace, I apologize for not trusting you. The problem was, I wasn't sure it would work, so I wasn't very convincing, Trace said. I hate to lie to you. Well, I like that policy, Gianni said. I'd appreciate if you continue not to lie to us. For the longest moment, I simply drank in the sights around me. The sky was bright and filled with mists and clouds. Hills rolled in front of us, and to one side I could see the wall, towering up into the mists with no top in sight. The hills were green and tan with crops, some dark green with trees, more colors than I knew existed. Trace's drawings had been accurate, and as I looked at the beautiful scene and thought about those drawings, I knew he loved the beauty of a reef as much as I did. It smelled and sounded alive. Bird calls filled the air. I heard children and adults and sounds I couldn't categorize. My nose filled with the scents of dozens of plants and even more things I couldn't categorize. Breathe, Trace said. I'd grabbed his hand before the jump, and he squeezed it and whispered into my ear. My entire body shivered at the feel of his breath on my skin. I guess you don't hate it. I don't hate it, I said. It has plants growing on it, Amma said, pointing toward a little house. At least, I thought it was a house. It was a hill with a door and windows. This is a very strange place. We think the same about discovering your world, Katie said with a chuckle. And then we have Trace's giant other realm eels. Just one more thing to make our reef the most unusual reef in the ocean. Wait, Amma said. Eels? In our reef? Under it, Trace said. There's a vent beneath your section of the reef, and it houses giant eels. They're not from our world. Amma laughed. Vattenausch. It's a myth. My grandmother told hero stories. Our people came from the sea, pirates and sea merchants, and the occasional hero. She told the hero stories, and often the hero had help from the Vattenausch, the guardian sea serpents. They glow to light the way in storms, and sometimes wrap around the evil men and save the day. Trace laughed out loud. Of course they do. We need a mythical creature in the mix, like volcanoes dropped into reefs, and impenetrable rock isn't enough. Vattenausch. I had no idea those stories were based on something real, Amma said, nor did I ever hear about any in the reef. Why are they there? For all I know, they were sent as guardians, Trace said. I'm not sure we'll ever know, but I'm going to try. I plan to join Gianni, Echo, and Trace into the ocean to find an other realm group of historians known as the Jonnakin, and while I was gone, Amma was staying in Tormandu in a home especially for older people who needed care. She seemed excited, and she said 5 times that she loved how warm it was here. Once we settled her, we said farewell to Katie and Dayton, the handsome man who worked with her, the man who set Echo's focus fluttering every time he was around. Now, Trace said, ready for your first visit to the ocean? I don't know, Gianni admitted. My head is spinning with everything new. You live in the ocean. In a boat that's under the water? A boat like Kaya's? I think we'll just show you, Echo said with a warm smile. While she had lost exactly what Trace had lost, She was more cheerful than her brother. So far, Echo's focus was the lightest I'd felt. I liked her. She nodded, and Trace played the jump while she played stamina. In a flash, we stood in their skipper. I knew it was their home and also a vehicle, something like the Ispatur. But when I opened my eyes, it looked nothing like my Ispatur. Nothing here was alive or warm, although the temperature was warm. Nothing was soft, and things with lights sat on tables everywhere. Trace led us into another room, this one with softer furnishings. This part looked more like a home. I moved to a window and watched creatures move on the reef wall. Fish and other creatures I didn't recognize. Tormandu lights some of the outside of their reef, so we can see all the life out here, Trace said, standing at my side. Normally, life underwater is very dark. What do you think? I smiled at him, because he felt comfortable here. I didn't think it was beautiful, but to Trace it was home. That gave it a little extra beauty. I think you're happy here, I said. He rewarded those words with a smile, and his fingers found mine, squeezing and immediately letting go. I already put the coordinates into the nav map, Echo said when a strange silence fell over us. Gianni is going to nap. His focus is still healing, and the strain in his head is bothering me. Kaya and I will take the helm. I can do that, Gianni said. Trace took him back to a room they would share, and I wasn't surprised when Trace stayed, also asleep a few randoms later. His focus had been worn since he'd finished clearing the mine shaft. He works harder than he lets on, Echo said of her brother. G is almost as strong as he is, so maybe he'll learn to ask for help. So, why don't you let me show you around? Although I didn't know Echo well and felt intimidated by her, by the end of our afternoon she had put me at ease. She didn't seem to think about being beautiful and strong. Instead, she showed me some of the equipment on her skipper. We'd plugged a lot of our samples into her sensors, and she explained to me what the results meant. I could tell she was proud of this equipment and what she could do with it. Mostly it tells me everything we find in your reef is unknown, Echo said with a sigh. How are we going to figure out how the fluids react with one another unless we know what we're dealing with? Are there still empty reefs? I asked. I mean, can you put some of those things together and see what happens? Test them? Echo laughed. We can. It might be the wisest thing we can do. And I didn't think of it. We'll see what the experts have to say, and then we might just run a few tests. What we forget is that we're experts too. We worked with my parents, and so Trace and I always felt like the junior team. But for 2 years we ran missions on our own. We solved problems. We did more than our share of rescues because Trace is just plain strong. When we lost our parents, it's like we lost the knowledge that we're capable adults. I was touched that she was sharing this with me. Echo could be my friend. I wondered if I was any good at friendship. It scared me that I might fail, but everything was new right now, new and exciting, and I wanted to try. I wanted to be a friend and have a friend. Then I thought about Gianni, who'd been my first real friend and my only dim-note companion. And Trace, who smiled at me like I was important and told me hard things when his focus told me his heart hurt. I didn't want just one friend. I wanted 3. Echo checked the nav map, and then she settled in the soft pit chair to drive with the reeds. I asked if I could listen. I thought it interesting that she didn't offer to teach me this song. She simply said Trace would teach it to me later. As I listened, I understood, because it was the most complicated song I'd heard yet. She said it had to do with water and drag and other things I didn't understand, and it made sense that she would turn something so complex over to her brother. How far are we? I asked. I found it surprising that she could play and talk. She said some songs took more concentration than others, but the driving song, while complex, was so common in her life she didn't have to think about it. We could jump, Echo said, but jumping a skipper takes a lot of strength. Instead, I'm driving it with the reeds, which speeds us up and uses no fuel. I see us getting there in 2 more days. Do you ever get tired of being on this ship? I asked. Echo laughed. Sometimes. Trace used to go crazy in here. And then he changed and doesn't want to leave. After losing your family? I asked. She nodded and looked out the window. The running lights lit the water, but there was so little to see that I could barely tell they were on. He changed so much, Kaya. I can't find him now. I mean, in a way he matured. Some of the changes were good, but not all of them. The pain is deep, I said. All of us lost people, but for him it's more recent. And he blames himself. Neither Gianni nor I blame ourselves for the earthquake. I wish he would see it for what it is, Echo said. In a way, his self-blame is as foolish as if you blamed yourself for an earthquake. The charterhead handled it wrong, but it wouldn't have mattered. Okay, that might not be true. If he'd let us start the evacuation right away, my family might have survived. But we didn't lose one citizen. We did lose the reef, but we'd have lost the reef either way. Trace was never in a position to save the reef. I don't understand why the charterhead chose to blame Trace when everyone lived. Trace came very close to killing himself saving those people, and he rescued every one of them, and the man said he was reckless. Unfortunately, that hit close to home, because Trace has been known to be reckless, or he seems reckless. Sometimes he's just so far ahead of the rest of us in his understanding of something that what seems reckless to us is very well thought out on his part. I nodded. I hope we can save our reef, for him as well as us. Would you go back? Echo asked. I don't know. I like seeing in the light. I can't explain how hard it is to hide during the day, never to fit in with anyone else, never to celebrate with them. Gianni understands because his life was similar, except his people thought he was extra special, so they kept him at arm's length. Both of us grew up lonely. I'm looking forward to knowing Gianni better, Echo said. He's good for Trace, I think. Gianni is great, I said. I felt a little jealousy. Did Echo want to know him personally, romantically? Did I? I thought I might have more feelings for Trace, but I couldn't deny that her words made me feel something uncomfortable. That was unfair. I couldn't have both men. Maybe I couldn't even have one. And was this the time to be thinking about things like that? Probably not. After a while, Echo took me to the back of the skipper, the living area, to find us food, and I stopped at a drawing. Echo stood at my side, her focus pulsing with pride and concern. He captures so much with a few lines, I said. Echo smiled. He does. I watched him draw on Montefallo. When he does, his focus shifts in an unusual way. I'm not sure what drives it. He mixed both joy and sadness. Echo touched the edge of the canvas, a landscape from beneath the ocean. She told me it was a villa colony, a collection of mismatched houses tethered to the ocean floor. Yes, Echo said. It used to bring only joy. Then it brought only sadness after we lost our family. I'm glad to hear he can draw with a little joy again. Maybe it doesn't matter. It's just something he does for fun. But I feel like it matters. Because it's different from singing, I said. It fills a deeper space. I don't know how to explain it, but he needs it. Singing takes power and precision. It's an art, yes, but it's not creative, Echo said. I agree about it filling a space. Trace has a lot of odd-shaped spaces to fill. He's a unique person. And as his sister, I say that as both compliment and insult. I smiled at that. Watching Trace and Echo together made me wish I had siblings. Late in the day, Trace and Gianni woke up feeling better, and Echo asked Trace to teach us to drive the skipper with the reeds. A few hundred randoms later, I was running the ship with the reeds. Trace relaxed in the pit seat at my side, and something beeped near my arm. I glanced down, no idea what most of the screens and panels meant. So far, I didn't like the machines of this world. They made things seem more complicated. The thought of learning both reed singing as well as the panels and buttons scared me. "Let's see," Trace said, pressing buttons and somehow moving the image from my screen to the one at his side. He stared a long time, his focus suddenly pounding with something I didn't recognize, something dark and bitter. Then he switched a button to make the message disappear. Without a word, he stood and walked toward the back of the ship. "What happened?" Echo asked, leaning over my seat. "What just happened?" "I don't know," I said. I let the wind drop, hoping I hadn't done something wrong. Something beeped. He looked at something over there, and then he left. His focus was distressed. Echo sat where Trace had been, pushing buttons and staring at the screen herself. Then she said something quiet under her breath and ran into the back. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing, moving back to the living area where Gianni sat on the sofa. "What happened?" he asked. "They feel very unsettled." I told him, and he glanced at the back of the vessel, the personal rooms where the pair had disappeared. Their foci were still strong in my head, only now I felt anger on top of the other distressing feelings. "Grief is difficult," G said quietly. "They still have so far to go." "It's worse because Trace won't let it be an accident," I said. "Yes." Gianni stretched. "What do you think?" "I'm not sure I like it here. Not in this ship." "I thought it wouldn't bother you since you lived in caves," I said. He laughed. "My caves had a lot more space than this, and having other people in my head isn't entirely comfortable. I whined about being alone for 16 years. Now I'm not sure it was such a bad thing." "I suspect you feel them more strongly than I do," I said. "Even when they're angry or whatever they're feeling now, it's better than being alone." "I was never as alone as you," Gianni said. "I had to deal with people, even if it was never intimate. I'm sorry you were that alone." I shrugged. "I'm not alone now." Echo asked if I could go back, to the reef. "And you said—" "I don't think I'd go, not if I can stay out here. Light and colors are fascinating, and people in my head and the skill I can use. No. You? Will you go back?" G ran his hand through his curls. "I like colors and light too. I like to sing. I like the company. But I'm the leader of the Scavari. I don't know if I have choices. I've never had choices." "I'm sorry," I said. "Nobody else could do your job?" "All of them could do my job, but they don't want to do it." "If we have to move to a new home, maybe you can settle them and then go. Reefs are run by charterheads. Maybe the Scavari won't need a leader like they have now." "I can hope," G said, "except that means I'm hoping for the death of my whole way of life." Echo asked me if there were folktales or myths that might explain us living in a volcano. I said no. Do the Scavari have any? Our people must have known they weren't home, but they hid it from their children. "I lost all my history," G said. "Whatever knowledge and stories the elders had has been gone a long time." "Are you curious? Don't you want to know where we came from? If it's another world and they can return us, would you want to go?" "I have no idea. I don't think I care where we came from. Although, if I could settle the people where they started, maybe I could return here." "What do you want to do here?" I asked. I ask because I'm not sure what I want to do here. "I want to learn to sing all the songs," he said. "I want to meet people from other worlds and talk to eldsingers and see villas and reefs all over Portomare. Maybe I want to stay with Trace and Echo and help. Their job is to help. I've spent my life helping, I guess, but this would be different. They would tell me where to go and what to do, and I could do it." I smiled. "As long as you don't lead." "Right. I've never quite developed a taste for leading." Gianni looked at the hallway. "A lot of pain there, and right now it's worse than normal. I wonder if Trace will ever tell the truth." "He's lying?" I asked. "About what?" "I don't know, but I strongly believe he's lying about something, and it's a secret that can cause him harm. "Did she turn that beacon on, or did you?" Trace asked. His voice was angry, low and dangerous, but his focus was giving Echo a completely different story. Terror and hurt and loss and regrets, all swimming through his head so wildly that she feared for his health. "I turned it on," she said, "but not on purpose. I turned it on when I explained to the others how to run the ship. I meant to turn it off." Trace ran his hands through his hair. "Now we know. Now if we ignore it, we're monsters." "We're not monsters. If the idea of a rescue causes you this much distress, then we'd be a danger if we tried to help. I'm not heading into a rescue with you if your head's not in the game." Trace growled and sat on the bed. "You're disappointed. You say you didn't activate the distress beacon on purpose, but you're disappointed that I won't help." Echo sat at his side. "I'm disappointed. Not that you won't help, but that you can't help. I'm sad that you're not ready yet. What you did for G and Kaya was a rescue, Trace. I think you might just have to do this. The first time won't be easy, but the fact that you feel like a monster for not being ready, maybe this needs to happen to get you over the hump." He closed his eyes, and she put her arms around him. She hadn't felt him this distressed in a long time, and she didn't understand it. "Let them know we can help," he said quietly from within her arms. "But don't ask me to make decisions. Choosing who lives and dies, I won't make that call." "Trace," Echo said, surprised by the words. "Is that what you think happened? We got all the citizens out." "To do it, we let our families die," he said angrily, bitterly. "That wasn't a choice we made," she said. "That was simply the way it had to be. The citizens come first." "Ask Rachel how she felt about that," Trace whispered. He ran his hand over damp eyes. "It sounds so heroic, but she was a teenager. She didn't want to die for a reef. She wanted to grow up." "Wait," Echo said, feeling a sinking in the pit of her stomach. "She told you this? You talked to her?" "She begged for me to get her out of there," he said, the words almost inaudible. "But I was literally moving 200 people when she asked. I had to say no. I had to finish what I was doing. I had to make a choice, and I didn't choose Rachel, my cousin, a girl who should still be alive." Echo sat back, stunned. "You never said anything. Why didn't you tell me? How dare you carry something like that all alone?" Trace stepped away from her. What would it help? What would it change? "You wouldn't be so alone," she said. "I made the choice alone." She was hurt and angry and so sad she felt like she weighed 1,000 pounds. "We're not calling in on this rescue. Not yet. I understand why you're not ready, why you might never be ready. You have nothing to prove, Trace. Except you told me I needed to get out there and do this, so apparently I do have something to prove." Echo let herself think about what Trace had said, imagining Rachel's words, her fear, what it would have been like to make the decision he'd made. But there had been no decision to make. If he'd been in the middle of a jump, he had to finish it. Keeping the citizens alive was their job. Except if she'd heard Rachel's plea, she wouldn't have cared about the job. Just like he hadn't cared. She was certain at that moment Trace hadn't cared one bit about citizens. If there had been any way to save all of them, he'd have done it. And he had likely spent the past cycles going over the event in his head, looking for another way. Trace pushed past her toward the front of the ship, likely to accept the rescue plea, which had been sent broadband to anyone in the area with the rescue channel on. She hoped someone else had already offered help, because she didn't think Trace should try this. His focus was painfully chaotic right now, and his judgment might not be good. "What's happening?" Kaya asked, when Echo entered the living area, where the two other realmers were sitting. "What's going on?" Echo stopped. Maybe they could stop him. Or maybe he needed to do this. She had no idea. She just knew her heart ached for him, and it ached more for Rachel, and she wanted to climb into bed and not deal with anything. A rescue. We got a call for a rescue because I left the beacon on. Only I don't think he's ready. More happened during the Bougainville disaster than I realized, and now he's angry and emotional and might not be good in a rescue. Gianni leaned forward. What kind of rescue? A nearby villa colony is having problems with its main generator, so a few homes are in trouble. It's a rescue we used to do often, but it's dangerous. Not as dangerous as some things, but he needs to approach it with a level head. You think you can talk him out of it? Kaya asked. She said it kindly, but her tone also indicated that trying to change Trace's mind might be the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. No, Echo said. Then we ought to help, Gianni said. Not that Kaya and I can do anything, but Trace might show a level head with us here. He'll slip into teacher mode. Echo laughed. True. Okay, try to be calm. He can read us better than you know, and if he thinks we're patronizing him, his hackles will go up. Kaya smiled at Gianni, who shrugged. Maybe Trace would see them as a team, and if he felt less alone, he'd finally let himself heal. She didn't think that plan had great odds, but it was the best she knew to do.